Section 1 of The Soul of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Ben Tucker. The Souls of the Streets. When we pass along a street we are apt to forget that it has a soul at all. We think of it only as so many houses to hurry by, so many lamp-posts to count, before we reach the end. But when a road is new to us, we realize, half unconsciously perhaps, that we are beginning an acquaintanceship with another being, one with moods and feelings like our own. The countryman who as a boy spends one day in a city street feels, when he returns, just that diffidence that we all feel, when we meet for the second time one whom we liked when first we saw him. We are not quite sure how far the friendship had progressed. He wonders, has the street forgotten him or not? I remember the moment when I first let myself be convinced that there really was a hidden life beneath the bricks and mortar. I was walking at midday down the crudest of suburban roads. The vulgarity, the insistent sameness of its repeated houses was repellent. I stopped and wondered as I looked along it how such an ugly thing could be. I believe I spoke my thought aloud. Suddenly, irresistibly, a mad, true idea seized me. I felt I knew that the street itself groaned beneath its sordid hideousness. The bright light was stripping its red brick commonplaces naked, so that, for very shame, it seemed to flaunt them in the eye. I knew that I was with a struggling soul, powerless to escape from its imprisonment, and since that moment the street has held a strange significance for me. Thoughts work within it. It cannot express them through the harsh medium of brick. But the thoughts are there. At twilight, on those days when the moon shines whitest white from the most delicate of blue skies, before the sun has wholly disappeared, a dimness fills it, softening and smoothing its ruggedness of effort. A little later, when the dimness becomes dusk and the lamps flicker silently on either side, it grows almost eloquent of the suppressed emotions of the day. I like to go and listen, as one watches the sad moving lips of a dumb man. I know it also in the midnight blackness, when the tired homecomers keep breaking on its silence. It seems to rest patiently, waiting like a dreamer for his dreams, until his family have gone to bed and left him to himself and mystery. Very early in the morning, before the dawn but after human interruption has done its worst, the soul of the street slips from its ugly sheath and rests in an ecstasy of quiet. Then is the time for him who would watch it, and know the beautiful wonder with which the most prosaic gaze at the poet who sees the things they cannot touch. Then there is absolute silence. The very cat flits phantom-like across, fearful to disturb its silent reverie. The watcher stands with stilled feet in the darkest darkness of a recess between the houses, or midway between the lamp-post sentinels. I envy the sleepers in the doorways. Surely in their dreams they are able to slip with quiet happiness into the larger dreams of the mysterious street. Look reverently on their faces. See how the anxious look of the beast praying for food passes away. A half-sad, always sweet smile hovers over the woman's countenance, as the soul of the street, compassionate, carries her up into its more beautiful dreamland. Those silent hours may well console the street for the pent, struggling misery of its glaring day. But then, when the dawn comes, the nurse brings light into the child's bedroom, and the child sobs half waking, half asleep, for the shattering of its mysteries. Who that has ever seen the sorrowful regret of the poor weary soul as the sun sends cruel piercing gleams into every cranny of the cave of its night's illusion, awakens it to all its ugliness and reminds it that it must pass another day in inarticulate sorrow, can fail to feel with me the sympathy for which the street must crave. Country lanes have no need to fear the day, though they too must enjoy the silence of the night. Their mystery is more obvious than that of the streets of town, and it is less persistently ignored. In the country are many thickly shaded paths and byways, where no maid dares to pass along at dark. The men laugh, but they hurry quickly through. All know that there is another life in the lane besides that of the eerie thing, half bird, half beast, that slips with shuddering whir through the brittle silences? Do they listen for footsteps padding behind them? Do they fear that some dark thing will spring upon them from the hedges? A huge dog? So they may picture it, but the presence that they fear belongs to the spirit of the place. I, who have learnt to know and love the souls of path and roads, do not fear the silence of the lane. Its brooding spirit conjures no horrors in my imagination. It lingers with me as I pass under the moss-covered crumbling wall of the old churchyard, down the little hill with that turn to the right, where a spring has bubbled for centuries from the earth, and a struggling moonbeam glints through the trees on the rippling waters of its tiny pool. Silently, it caresses me as I walk beneath the lofty hedges. I walk quietly as one walks in the presence of a loved one hurt, for I know it would speak but cannot. They cannot speak. There is the tragedy of the highways and byways of man. Do not say again that they are without souls. Our neglect is cruel, but of man. Oh, what cruelty to mock their dumbness to their listening silence. What memories would be lost if the ancient streets had no souls fit for dreaming? They have, and the lonely passerby knows that they dream their stories to themselves, thrilling with their horror, throbbing softly with their tenderness. The tramping myriads on the Roman roads have left a legacy of tales behind them. Thousands of whisperings of elves and pygmies cling about the woodland paths. The memories of unsung songs, sparkling like fountains from the white mists, haunt the mountain tracks. The serious, sweet talk of children ages past must still delight the footways in the meadows. The rumbling of 1,000 years still rolls in the deserted streets of dying cities. Does anybody tell me that the dances on the village green have left untouched the soul of the light-hearted road that picks its way across it? Surely not. The old peddlers passing on their way, the bodies swinging from the gibbet, the sauntering lovers all have added something to the memories of the path. When that horseman passes, as still he does, in his clothes these 2 centuries out of fashion, on his horse with silent hoofs, the pilgrim's road still shudders at the empty scabbard swinging at his side, jolting without a sound. But why should I say this? Men who think and women who feel know in themselves that there is more in streets than stones. The thoughtless and the heartless are of no account. Does the poet mind if they pass him by? Does the lark grieve if his song reaches only those whose ears are fit to hear it? Does the street care that the beauty of its silent soul can touch only those who will, for love of it, go softly, silently, in the solemn reverence of the night? End of Section 1. The Souls of the Streets. Section 2 of The Souls of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ben Tucker. A Tuscan Melody. 700 years ago, when the art of Italy was glowing from a new fire, and strong with a new youth, a poet of whom little is known parted from his lady in a Tuscan orange grove. The fading blue of the sky above them, and the green and bright color of the orange trees dim in the sudden twilight, made a sweet-toned background to her small, delicately shaped Italian head, and greatly pleased the poet. Those were caressing words that he whispered as they waited in the dusk. They parted, she to thread her way down to the village, he upwards to the little house above the orange trees. Her round lips pouted as she slipped away. "He does not love me. No, he does not love me." Their petulant little curves seemed to whisper to each other. Yet, when his hand was on his door latch, he stood for many minutes looking down to where her white dress flickered through the trees. Looking at him then, one would have said he loved her. But suddenly a sweeter smile moved his face. A brighter light lit his eyes. He looked like one before whom the beauty of the earth has dawned in a glowing cloud on a pale sky. He disappeared into the house, and was soon striding up and down a brown wood room, bare with scanty furniture. Words were singing in his ears. His heart throbbed to a strangely beautiful measure. Now and again he took a long pen from a small table in a corner of the room, and wrote words upon a piece of parchment. Then he would cross them out and write the words again, His face shone like the lantern of pale glass that hung in the corner over the table. Looking upon him then, one would have said that all the love of all his life was held in the faint thing that he was snatching from the air and setting out in trembling, loving strokes upon his scrap of vellum. All night he worked, building up a song from live words, and fitting them with all the art that was in him to a fine old Tuscan melody. As the orange trees broke into brilliance under the morning sun, his song was finished, and he rested for a moment, humming it happily over to himself. Then, drunk with the joy of having made a new thing, he ran down the hill to bring Valeria, his lady, who had the sweetest voice in all the valley, that she might be the first to sing the song that he had made. Then, indeed, was he in love, whether with the sparkling song, each word of which seemed like a little mesh in the net of music that held his soul, a panting, trembling captive, or with the thought of the dainty Lady Valeria singing it over in the house above the orange trees, it were impossible to say. He found Valeria, and brought her all untidy and fresh as the dew on the grass, at tumbling pace up through the trees. They climbed hand in hand. His hand held hers so tight that the blood that beat in him seemed to her to belong to her own veins also. Surely he loves me, she thought. Ever as they ran he kept telling her the words of the song, lilting over the melody she was to sing. They reached the house, and he took a long draught of wine, holding it up for her to see the sunlight sparkling in its crimson depths. She refused when he offered it, but he made her sip a little that her song might rise the sweeter. She sang, and the poet turned his head aside, gazing dumbly out over the valley, and a mist was in his eyes. The beauty of Valeria bringing that other beauty from the heart of his own song was like the bright lightning that stuns everything to silent thought. As she neared the end of the song, he turned again towards her, and when she stopped with a little sob in her voice, he caught her in his arms. She sang it for him again and again. He knew as she sang that he loved her. Shortly they were married. This is the end of the story of Valeria and her poet, but the tale of the song is not finished yet, nor ever will be while men love to hear their women singing. For the little wild thing that was born to the poet in that mad happy night in the house above the orange grove has been sung through all the world so long and so often that the name of the poet has been forgotten. The peasants in the valley call it Valeria's song, for when she came down into the village it was ever on her lips. They loved the music and the words, and passed them on from mouth to mouth, long after the poet and Valeria lay together under the grass with the orange trees blossoming above their grave. The poem was sung nightly in the hot Italian summers when the peasants sat together after sunset, watching the reds and greens of the sky darken to purple and deep blue. Petrarch heard it sung in his Tuscan childhood, and he wrote other words to fit the music, but the old words clung on, and may still be heard in the valley where they were written. The song might always have remained here as one of the old songs of the place, and never been known elsewhere if it had not been for a fortunate accident. One year, when the valley was not so prosperous as to promise employment for all its young men, a youth, one of a numerous family, determined to leave his home and hack a golden fortune from the wealth of Pisa. This youth was clever in the making of little statues, and his voice was clear and fresh. He came to Pisa, and as he had not money to rent a booth, he placed his figures on a tray and carried them through the streets. Friendless among the quick, contemptuous dwellers in the city, he was puzzled and not a little dismayed by the finely dressed youths who swaggered past him, and the quaint dresses of the sailing folk who came from all parts of the world. He was very lonely. To lift his soul, which felt bruised and beaten by the buzz around him, he sang as he walked. The old song of the valley he had left, away in the Tuscan hills. As he sang, he forgot the passing people and all the hum of the chattering trading city. He thought of the big tree in the middle of his village, in whose boughs he had sat and teasingly flung leaves and twigs at a dark-haired girl who stood gazing up at him. Perhaps he thought a little of her also. However that may be, he did not notice a tall Pisan who stopped to listen to him, so that he started quickly when the man laid a hand on the curling black hair that covered his bare head. "Youth," said he, "you must sing that song before my master. Whence came it? Who was its author?" The lad was accustomed to speak freely, and, undismayed by the dignity of his listener, who was a man finely dressed, he told what little he knew of the origin of the poem. He was taken to a great house richly furnished, and sang the song before one of the greatest nobles of the city. He listened to the song, and it brought a wistful look of a man rather than of a statesman to his care-laden eyes. He had the song sung over again and often afterwards, and it was spread through all Pisa. From Pisa it was carried to all the cities of Italy by travelers, or the accidents of war. The Venetians knew it. It became a common street song in Rome and Naples, and often on cool nights in Florence, youths and maidens drifting in silent boat between the banks of the Arno heard music in the houses that they passed. And this song, with its ancient Tuscan melody, floated to them over the water in the beam of light from one of the open windows. From Venice it found its way northward into the rugged life of Germany. The old strong life still throbbed in the pulses of the north, when an engraver in wood came over the hills to the city on the sea. His manners were rough, of the north, but his face was free and open, and he soon became a favorite among the artists of Venice. One, in particular, grew very close with him, and the two worked in the same room. Now this artist was painting a picture for a rich man, and a noble Venetian lady who loved him was sitting as a model. She was fond of singing, and among all the songs she knew, this Tuscan song was her favorite. Once, as they were preparing their painting tools, she sang it to beguile the time. The tune and its words seized the German artist and held him fast. Though in the words there was nothing sorrowful, yet it moved him as it had moved the man who wrote it, and his sight was dimmed with tears. He begged her for the words and found a strange joy in the swaying rhythms of the Latin that she taught him, half laughing at his eagerness. Then, when he returned to the north, he chanted the song at one of the merry feasts, where soldiers and artists, priests and poets sat together heartily at a single board. He sang it hesitatingly as one exhibits a new sword which looks handsome, but has given no proof of its strength. Under his broad eyebrows he looked round for the applause he expected and won. The others asked him for the words. Twice he repeated them. Then, with crash of flagons on the table, the whole company of men in lusty chorus chanted the ancient song until the rafters creaked. Already the song had filled all Italy and been carried across the seas to the east and across the hills to the north, when, hundreds of years after that first singing in the orange grove among the Tuscan hills, traveling singers carried it west to the Dutch fishermen, who chanted it as they brought their boats to beach, to the roistering taverns of old France, and in many varying versions to Norway and the unknown lands beyond. About this time, when all the world was singing, when lovers sang beneath the windows of their loves, and peace and war alike filled men with song, the melody came curiously to England. A pious English pilgrim, with a little of the devil still in him, that he wished to cast out by his pilgrimage to Jerusalem, was tramping across Europe, singing as he went psalm tunes and all manner of godly chants. One day in southern Germany, as he passed under the windows of an old brown inn, a voice started into the air directly above him. His pious meditation was so strong upon him that he was decidedly startled, but all thoughts of angels or devils were flung from his mind when, looking up, he saw a red-cheeked German maiden leaning from a window-sill, singing heartfully this same old Tuscan song. Pilgrim though he was, he tucked up his skirts, dropped his staff and scrip, and in 2 bars of the song was up to the wooden stairs and laughingly pursuing that German maiden round and round a table. He caught her at last, of course, and she sang the song to him very sweetly, sitting before him on the table, swinging her wooden shoes. He vowed that he would sing it himself, and it is recorded that he entered the holy city with the wild thrill of the Tuscan melody upon his pious lips. When he returned to England, his song spread far among the learned, and soon descended to the unlearned, who sang it quite as lustily. As years passed, it became most popular, and the chubby little boys who sat cross-legged on imitation dolphins sang it to Queen Elizabeth at that famous revel in the grounds of Kenilworth Castle. She was pleased with its melody, and had a copy writ on vellum in inks of red and green, with much fine gold, and caused her pages to sing it to her when she rested in a balcony of Windsor, weary and tired from her day of careful skimming. For the next 200 years the song was sung through all Egypt, by the students of the universities, by soldiers on the march, by merry-making priests. The light-haired girls of Germany and the dark-haired ladies of Spain sang it always with the same subtle enjoyment, bringing gaiety to some and tears to others. But of all the stories of its singing that we know, there is none I like so well as this, of 18th-century France. A dainty demoiselle, given the words by a stiff old singing-master, read them and found them sweet to her careful little tongue. She stood by the gray-headed man at the instrument, and her slender throat swelled up and down with the wavelets of the song. She sang it as it should be sung, with the fresh passion and clear voice of a young girl, and the old master bent his locks over her little hands and kissed them for her singing. Then she blushed prettily and would sing no more till, coaxed by the pleading, courteous old gentleman, she burst out laughingly with one of the lilting songs of the France that has long been dead except in the souls of her poets. Lastly, to prove that all this is true, was not the old song sung to me tonight, when dusk caressed the apples in my orchard? Two girls looked like spirits in their pale dresses against the darkness of the trees, saying to me, leaning on a bough whose faint pink blossoms still showed dim in the twilight. Only an hour ago, when I passed into my cottage, the stars sang high in the heavens above me, and the echoes of those two sweet girlish voices were clinging round my heart. Besides these, the song and the melody, which is older than the song, have had many other adventures. They have been woven into operas and sung in brilliant theaters in cold glimmering streets, in crowded cities and on the wide expanses of the East. Some day I mean to build the stories of the singings into a little book. End of Section 2, A Tuscan Melody. Section 3 of The Souls of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain, read by Ben Tucker. The Hidden Lands. Not many days ago I heard from a simple-minded man an interesting description of a cheap coffee house that seems, to ordinary people, dirty, tawdry, and ugly. It has a multitude of cheap-looking glasses and spidery iron pillars, yet it showed differently to him. He talked of lofty halls and austerely decorated ceilings, supported by black columns molded for the strength that is also beauty. In these halls, he said, move maidens whose dark hair masses on fine white necks, girls of subtle grace, of delicate line, maidens whom Beardsley would have loved. They carry food on silver salvers, and the soft tints of the meats are harmonized with the restful colors of the walls. There are rooms with myriad mirrors, where one fair face may echo 1,000 times through the dimmest caves of beauty. Tall glasses filled with opalescent wines stand on ebon tables. Those who feed there feed not as men who eat, but as devotees who offer. The place is dim with a reverence most beautiful. Why do you laugh at him? Does he talk folly? Does he describe what is not? I think you are mistaken, though for the moment only. For the man had used his imagination, and made an ugly place as beautiful as he wished. We can all do this. Poets and painters do it habitually, and that is why they so often make things beautiful for us that we have once thought coarse and impossible in poetry or art. Consider. The imagination that fairy godmother, whom many of us neglect, shows us things that the dull finger cannot touch, that the scarcely more delicate eye cannot see. Because eye and finger cannot detect them, it does not follow that these things are not. The sights of the imagination are no less real to him who sees them than the blunter and harder-hitting visions that appear in the more ordinary way. Indeed, it is sometimes hard to distinguish between them. Who has not felt himself a traveler in a big strange land, full of white palaces and stately people, when on some night, when the lamps send violet colors through the mist, he has passed on an omnibus, the statues and the gates of the park? It is impossible to say where the reality loses itself in the imagination. Surely you, now that you see what I mean, are ready to agree with me. You have seen things so yourself, but have not whispered of them to others lest they should think you mad. The lamps of a hansom cab have blinked at you with the green eyes of a goblin. You have seen an embodied dream, floating like a dim barge in the mist of the river. Perhaps a brownie with flickering legs has flashed round the corner of a street in front of you. Or it may have been something less exciting, though more beautiful. In an autumn orchard you have felt the subtle presence of a shape between the leaves. In the backwater of a flowing river where the stream sets silently back against the bending rushes, You have been startled by a lovely face that left you with a sudden knowledge of your loss. Something, I feel sure, has let you feel that the godmother's chariot was as real as Cinderella's green pumpkin. Then, also, all of us who dream know that the dreamlands are quite real as the places of the day. How beautiful are those dreamlands, where night after night the soul notes the familiar landmarks, meets the familiar spirits. One garden I remember with particular distinctness from the lands I have visited asleep. It is a prim, gentle garden full of trained flowers and Quaker goodness. A wandering white path turns again and again under low apple trees and cherries, where slim damsels bend lest the branches brush their hair. The path disappears in a little shrubbery, where I have taken refuge from a shower of silver rain. Inside it is another garden older than the first, and here is always a fair slight girl in a long pink dress, who stands by a tall bending plant that I think must be a hollyhock. A pale butterfly seems to flicker around her hair, but I think it is really still like all else. In this garden I have known no rain, nor have I ever been able to observe anything, for all the glances that I cast around are gathered up by the beauty of the girl, and she stirs not, but is. Some day I shall be able to speak with her, and, though I have never heard it, in that moment I shall know her name. Troubled not with mine, but remember your own sweet visions. Happiest of men are those who see with their own eyes, and all may do so, if they will be content to make themselves as children, and look at everything as if they saw it for the first time, and had heard nothing of it from anyone else. Those who do this walk about London with the rest of us, but for them it is a different city. They go into the country as into a fairyland, but they do not neglect the fairylands at home. They see in this town of ours not a succession of busy streets, passages, and a huge building, but 1,000 hidden lands full of the beauty of joy or of sorrow. They feel but for a moment that the ugliness is near, and instantly turn to one of the many mystic countries it contains. In the heat and thunder of a foundry they see the battling fires of hell, and listen to the rolling of the treadmill. They lean from the silent balcony of the embankment and see dim mystery hanging over slowly moving time. Those dim dreams I spoke of loom darkly and suggestively out of the mist. Far away, the bridges, like threads of fairy lights, are strung from side to side. As they fly through the storm on the top of an electric car, the beating wind and rain become the spray and the breath of a ghostly sea. There is a wild seashore, and the grinding whir of the car is the ceaseless, tireless breaking of waves over the beach. Surely you know that shore, where white storm women with blown hair rest on rocks, clasping their knees, facing the wind and listening as if in ecstasy to the delirious music of the sea. Surely you also know these lands. Perhaps not this, but others that I know not of, and others again that I know too, which are too beautiful for us to tell of. For you and I, as well as that strange simple man, have wandered in the hidden lands, whose gates are closed forever to those machines we recognize and fear, whose power is in walking and talking, and in the transaction of business. End of Section 3, The Hidden Lands. Section 4, of The Souls of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ben Tucker. A man who knew himself. There are some people who find it easier to understand other people's minds than their own. We all know those sharp-tongued, uncomfortable ladies who seem to hold a character between their neatly gloved fingers, picking it daintily to pieces and scattering its remnants to the wind. How we hate them, and how fascinating is their conversation. We can listen for hours untired, watching the deft dissection of a mind that has seemed to us impregnable at every point. In the tricks of talk, all the little ridiculous affectations of the unfortunate subject are exaggerated before us, so that all who listen gain a pleasant feeling of superiority. But at the end we pass away sadly. We have seen things too close to enjoy them. Our idols have been stripped of gold and ornament and left bare stones before us. We feel like poets before a scientist. But if we ask the dissector to dive into her own character and tell us the truth about it also, she skillfully parries us with an airy nothing that floats far away, carrying our thoughts with it. Yet her face is left puzzled and half dismayed. She finds self-analysis impossible. There are others with the courage not only to pull their friends to pieces, but to search and probe among their own heartstrings. If their reason is self-assertive and strong, they may become critics, men like Saint Beuve or Hippolyte Taine. But if their strength lies in their emotion, and they can live easier in their imagination than in reality, their self-analysis leads often to most woeful results. If they are original writers, they lose their originality by seeing its source and growing ashamed of it. I know a really brilliant man, with an intellect polished at all points, sensitive as a mirror to the gentlest breath. He has produced just a very little imaginative work, but that little of the highest worth. The strength of his character has already been spent, though he is still young, in the study of other people's minds. He has no future before him. Merlin, for so I must call him, since I cannot give his real name, pleases acquaintances enormously at their first meeting, but repels them at the second. His friends who know him better enjoy him more. They find him so delightful, and his intellect so stimulating, that it is worth their while to steel themselves against the cruelly biting criticisms that he cannot save himself from making. For in talking, he sees at once exactly what his listener is hoping that he will say. He says it, but adds a little something that shows that he knew why it was wanted. He is like the uncle who gives a child a penny and adds, "Don't spend it on sweets." His sentences are like wasps, beautiful in their first flash of color, but with an unpleasant sting in their tails. Superficial people cannot bear him. He sees through them and cannot resist the insidious pleasure of giving them his little chocolates filled inside with soap. I never met anyone able in ordinary conversation to give such penetrating criticisms of literature or art. The keenness of his intellect has been sharpened on himself. When we meet, as we do once a week or oftener, Merlin, a poet, one or two painters, and one or two nondescripts, in a little tavern not known to over many, he sits quietly in the corner by the fireplace. Then, when the talk grows excited and urgent round the table, over the merits of an author or an artist, a friend or an enemy, a small sentence leaves him which shows at once the insignificance of the man discussed and the incompetence of those who are discussing him. He pierces in half an hour to the heart of a book, and sees what the author had aimed at, how far he had failed and why. He looks at a painting, and, in his first words, shows where the artist has been overwhelmed by his medium, and begun to paint with paint instead of with emotion. With these powers, it is little wonder that he is a superb critic, a reviewer in whom a common man may safely trust. But what of his original work, that in his youth gave promise of great things? He does gradually less and less, and seeing as he does so clearly the petty motives that urge others to their work, he begins to scorn his own. He asks himself if he has a right to write at all. Has he a message or a mission? Of course he has not. The mission of an artist is to build works of art. But Merlin, with his wizard eyes, sees through all the excuses of himself and others, and at last reaches such a condition that he cannot write even if he wished. He thinks that since others produced beautiful things, it is enough for him to contemplate them. He sees so clearly the pettiness of others that he cannot believe in the greatness of himself. He has so accustomed himself to the dissection of other people that he cannot do the smallest thing without getting outside himself, considering the matter and deciding that it was not worth doing. He is not the introspection of Sir Thomas Browne, who could watch the workings of his own mind and yet think it worth while to write them down. It is the introspection of the suicide who finds all things useless, and so, being forced to do something, does the most useless of them all. Truly, it is dangerous for all but self-conceited persons to pry too deep into the mind. There are some who can see their own frivolity, and yet work on unabashed. Of such are the best of essayists. They can look at themselves in a mirror and go away without humility. Not so Merlin. He might have been a great imaginative writer. Small things produce emotion in him. He can visualize and intensify all he feels. His prose is a pleasure to read, and his verse is cut as cleanly as if with a chisel. But the self-distrust that has been forced upon him by his power of seeing too deep has taken him from the writing of his own conceptions to the weighing of the fantasies of others, which, keen critic as he is he invariably finds wanting. End of section 4. A man who knew himself. Section 5 of The Souls of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ben Tucker. 2 Tramps. The road rang with the tramp of my heavy boots. With each step on the hard ground, with each breath of the fresh, clean air, I felt more thoroughly alive. I shouted incoherently and laughed at astonished laborers in fields bordering the roads. Presently I topped a little hill, whence I could see the gray road disappear in the trees beneath me, and rise again through the pasture and plowed land on the other side of the valley. 2 figures moved up out of the trees, a man and a woman. I plunged down the hill to overtake them. The greenish-gray pillars of the tall trees around me rose like lichened monuments. I would have stayed to sink into the contemplation that they suggested, but I longed for talk, and guessed that before me were companions, tramps like myself. I came out into the light, leaving the trees behind. I strode on, and soon had the travelers again in sight. The 2 figures were close together, and puffs of smoke came first from one side, and then from the other. What was the explanation? As I reached them, I understood. They had but one clay pipe between them, and were enjoying alternate whiffs. My own clay was in my hand empty. With high courtesy, they offered me tobacco from a round tin box. It was good tobacco. They also approved of my taste. Seeming glad of a companion, they talked slowly and well, discussing the superior merits of clays compared with the briars of the luxurious, the unpleasantness of Stratford-on-Avon, the advantages of a ruined bridge not far beyond it as a resting place for the night, the wonderfully muscular chucker out, attached to a little Emscote inn, and to my great joy told me about themselves. The man seemed about 50, the woman probably 40. Both had tramped continuously for almost as long as they could remember. They had been married nearly 20 years before, so they told me with pride and half-laughable sidelong glances. They were great on the advantages of combination in tramping, and advised me to take up with a mate if I was seriously adopting the profession. They regretted that, although they had a daughter, she had recently left them to marry a young barman. "But she's known the road too long to leave it altogether. She'll be tramping it again in the spring," the old man added consolingly. I noticed that, though they seemed to have lost all sense of the beauty of things around them, the man kept reminding the woman of things that had happened at this or that point of the road. He thoroughly enjoyed himself, for his powers of recollection were fresh and his store of memories unending. Every style held a tale for him. So had the old couple trudged through life, always ready to smile at the joke of their existence. So they were ready to trudge on to the last, tramping, always tramping, until they might reach the end they would prefer, and die as they had lived, on tramp. We slept under the old bridge. When I awoke, I found that the man was bathing in the pool below. Old though he was a beautiful swimmer. I joined him in the water. After breakfast we parted. He liked the place, he said. Would I not wait? I could not, and passed on down the gray road with the dust hanging on its edges and rising in little clouds about my feet. We hoped that we should meet again, but as I looked back I saw the old man turning once more towards the pool, and the woman tending the little fire she had kindled. I was but an incident of the way, like a toad on the road, or a queer bird by the roadside. End of section 5. 2 Tramps. Section 6 of The Souls of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ben Tucker. Spring. We left our bicycles and pretended that we had walked. The turf was dry and encouraging. We nestled to it, blinked the dust from our eyes, and gazed out over the moor. White puffs of dust rose from the road beneath us. Motors and bicycles harshly reminded us of civilization, but when we looked out over the inexpressible wideness to where the far hills lay, deep blue against the sky, when we glanced behind us at the leafless filigree of trees on soft gray clouds and above us at the melting eyes of heaven, we were alone with the earth, young and jubilant as ourselves. Once before, walking from quiet Willoughby to Dunchurch in Warwickshire, I had felt something of this same sensation. I had felt almost in tune with the music of the world. Then I was alone, and I remembered looking back from the top of the Dunchurch hill over the heads of the trees through which I had passed, and wondering whether such a moment can come more than once in a man's life. I had my answer now. Then there had been something incomplete. Some one note had been missing from the chord. I knew now what it was. She was an English girl. She knew no literary or artistic sensitiveness to lead her to speak the poor platitudes of spring. She lay there smiling, content to be happy, without knowing the secret of her happiness. She was simply herself, a lovely manifestation of the beautiful childhood of the world. In her clear laugh was the laughter of all life, and the wakening joyousness of spring. I thought of the quaint words of a Japanese poet friend, far away over the seas. Spring, naughty sweet spring, a proud coquette, born to laugh but not to live. Spring, flying spring, a beautiful runaway, leaves me in tears, but my soul follows after till I catch her next March. Spring, spring. March had come, and we had caught her, we two, up on the high downs. I told her of the Japanese song. She laughed lightly. "Isn't it splendid?" she said, and those 3 words as she said them held all the sequel to the poem. I lay there looking at her. The laughter of spring danced in her eyes and smiled on her as she lay in a pose of perfect content. Was she not spring herself? Was it not just her own unconsciousness of herself and her significance that let her say so much by doing so little? I, try as I will, cannot express 1/100th part of what she said once for all in her eloquent silence. Unconscious poetry is the sweetest after all. I shall never feel again as I felt that day, looking up from the crisp grass into the face of spring, laughing silently in the joy of her existence. She laughed, and the sunshine laughed with her. She and the sunshine were one. It was natural that they should laugh together. I should like some little thing to incarnate the feeling of that afternoon, a sprig of the spring gorse, or a few florets of the dry moss that we idly rolled between our fingers. I should like it to help me to remember those moments when I may. God, let not that time come. Be too old to feel the spring. Things were very silent. The whistle of a far-off train sounded as if from another world, a world without a spring. It was as if a sudden cloud had crossed the sun. But she laughed, and in her laugh, even that world of jars and edges, was brought into the glorious ceremonial. On that moor must be an eternal spring. It seemed as if it had laughed, with her laugh, from the beginning of time. Something absolutely irresistible shamed me. The pipe in my mouth, its faint blue smoke hanging above me, seemed a sacrilege. I lay it on the ground and waited bareheaded. I knew now what it was that so exhilarated us. We were partakers of the oldest and loveliest of all sacraments, the sacrament of spring. The lights cooled in the sky. As we flew down the hill together under the pines, she laughed once more, a little low laugh in the dusk. "What is it?" I asked, though I knew what the answer would be. "Oh, nothing. It's just this." And that was answer enough. End of Section 6. Spring. Section 7 of The Souls of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Read by Ben Tucker. The Secret of the Wild Rose. When the sun shone upon an earth on which men were very few, when moons swam through the sky shedding violet light over a silence so absolute that there were none to listen to it, when flowers and trees were conscious of themselves alone, and of none to whom they need bow, of none to whose vanity they need to be sacrificed, when silent things full of beauty were first stirring in the earth as earth's mysteries were building, before there were any to seek to understand them. Then, in the season of the year that we now call June, the first wild rosebud was born. Green, the fresh, soft green of spring, was everywhere where the rough bushes of the moor lost themselves in the thicker, wilder growths of the wood. a little thing came slowly into knowledge of itself. It was made of pink petals, shading into white. Thin veins ran through the delicate coloring that seemed to be continually moving, and the petals were folded together over its heart, and green leaves lapped it round. It began to feel itself alive, and wonder at its existence. As if to try its powers, it folded and unfolded its petals, and just then, in the early morning, a strange thing happened. A wood girl, lithe and beautiful, crept out through the undergrowth, and looking up saw the rosebud. She stopped and looked wonderingly at it, though she had never taken much notice of flowers before. In that moment the wild rose knew the reason of itself, the subtle mystery that is hidden in its guarding petals. Since then many have gazed like the wood girl and wondered at the mystery, but the secret is still hidden, and still the wild rose laughs to itself as it rests among its jagged leaves. I have often pondered with a quiet pleasure over this secret that makes the rose more lovable than other flowers. I am reminded of that simple lady of old times, who had a hidden charm that made all who saw her love her. She threw away the charm and died lonely and uncared for, but I do not think the rose will ever yield its secret, though once I remember I thought I had found one who could discover it. Wild roses lay in a shallow dish on a table. Beside them a bowl blossomed with dog violets, little pansies who smile up openly in one's face without a thought behind. A lady sat in a chair by the side of the table. She leant her head back among red cushions, and the tips of her fingers met around her knees. She was watching the flowers. I watched both them and her. "Innocent little things," she said at last of the violets, and I felt she knew all that was in them. But I waited in vain for her verdict on the roses. They baffled her as they baffle us all with their delicate beauty, clear as young girls and as full of mystery. What is this secret of the rosebud that shines like a lamp through the shading pink of its petals? What is the secret that it hugs to itself all its tiny life? High in the hedgerow at the end of June, when the summer rains have left the edges of the leaves to glisten in the sun, the little wild rose that is yet to open waves before all who pass. The old man looks and remembers the rose that he picked these 50 years ago for the bent woman who still walks beside him, her mittened hand still resting on his strong, tired arm. Children look up to it and laugh, not knowing why it pleases them. The fine lady in her carriage, tired and unhappy with her artificial luxuries, smiles cheerfully once more as she sees the rosebud laughing to itself in the top of the hedge, as if there never was a secret in the world so wholly delicious as its own. What is this secret? There have been a few, poets and children, who have found a solution for themselves, but their ideas have all been different. I know a little girl who thought that the petals made a tiny casket, and that the faint light that shines through them came from some sort of spirit of prettiness inside. She said that if you were very unhappy, you had only to find the right rosebud, when it would open and let the soul of prettiness into the air like a little puff of smoke, and that if you were crying, this would make the colored sunshine that is so pretty seen through even the saddest tears. One day she was unhappy without knowing why. She was sorrowful with one of those dim world sorrows that sometimes lift one of us and make a poet of him. She ran out alone to the wild rose lane and came to her favorite tree. She knelt down in front of it and prayed to it to comfort her. For a long time nothing happened. Then she stood up and saw a little rosebud half hidden in the leaves. And as she watched, she saw its petals fall slowly back, and she thinks she saw the little faint smoke come out of it. But she is not sure. Anyhow, when it was quite open, she found that she was not feeling unhappy any more. Perhaps she knew the secret. She was certainly more likely to know it than any elderly person with an appalling knowledge of botany, who can explain every bit of a rosebud to you and never get near its meaning at all. Then there was that Italian prisoner who was shut in a small room of hard white stone, with no books and no pictures. He had a slit for a window, but it was placed so high on his wall that he could only see the sky. He was miserable, for he was a poet and loved books and colors and especially flowers. One day in the early summer, looking up at the little patch of bright sky that he could see through the window, he noticed a twig that grew steadily. In a week a rosebud and a few leaves had spread across the slit. He did not like looking at it in the daytime, for then it was hard and black against the brilliant sky. But in the evening, when the sky paled and the light outside grew fainter, he could see the color of the bud and the dim green of the leaves. He grew to love the bud and watched eagerly for its opening. He too longed to guess its secret. As it opened, its petals showed dark red, and it so happened from the way the bud was placed that it shaped like a crimson heart. And the fancy seized him that it was the heart of the dainty Italian lady for whose sake he was in prison. This idea quickened, and he seemed to himself to have forgotten the lady and to be living for the rose alone. Then came the end. One evening when the sky was red, he heard voices outside, and he heard his lady's voice whispering lightly to another. "So he is in there, where the rose climbs across the window." The other laughed and said, "Shall we cut the flower, that he may know we have not forgotten him?" She answered, "Yes, for I love him not at all, and you altogether." And the prisoner inside cried out in a terrible voice, but he saw the rose drop away from the window, leaving nothing but the sky. And the sky seemed to swim in blood, and a few hours afterwards, when jailers came to bring him food, they found him mad, repeating monotonously, "They have broken the secret of the rose." I cannot believe that he ever knew it. It is so ethereal a thing that tragedy would surely blur its edges. Yet roses have been the flowers of court. They have carried poisons. Men going to fight have worn them on their breasts. They have held notes passing like daggers between evil men and women. They have kept the secrets of others. But they have always kept their own, and I fancy that the roses of courts were hot garden roses, bursting and overfull with crimson petals, and not the little roses that cling by dusty road and wooded path. It is the secret that sleeps in the little wild heart of the free rose that I have always longed to know. Why is it that we love it above all other flowers? Why is it that it is with us the symbol of love and youth? The young man carries a pink rose and a white when he goes to tryst in the twilight. The girl wears wild roses in her tumbled hair. The tired eyes of a worker in town are rested by the roses hanging over the edge of the jam pot on the window-sill. Would not another flower do? There is not one with its restful sense of mystery. We cannot guess the secret, but it is good to creep nearer it in wondering at its powers. If ever it were possible at all, I should have caught the rose's mystery from 2 dead flowers I have. Little brown hands laid them a year ago on a poetry book that we had read together. I let them lie for days, and though they faded, their beauty seemed as if it could not die. Then they slept, 2 bundles of pink petals, turning brown between 2 pages of the songbook. They are always there when I turn to my favorite songs. Always their mysterious scent rises from the pages. Yet though I love them, and the hands that plucked them, and the book wherein they lie, their secret is still their own, insoluble, intangible, a Tantalus that is so sweet I would not have it broken for the world. For the joy of the rose is in its mystery, and if we discovered it, it would die, just as the old mysteries of the world fade before our prying eyes. End of Section 7, The Secret of the Rose. End of The Souls of the Streets and Other Little Papers by Arthur Ransome.